Welcome to the Massive Change Show. I'm Justin Foster.
And I'm Dr. Virginia Lacayo. In each episode, we have conversation with leaders who are getting in some good trouble by challenging paradigms and shaking the system.
And after each conversation, the episode shifts to the second show, where Virginia and I chat about what we learned from the guest.
If you know of any leaders who will make a great guest, please introduce us.
And of course, if you enjoy the show, please like, share, and leave a review.
Thanks for listening.
In this episode of the Massive Change Show, we visit with Lisa Beattie Frelinghuysen, co-founder of ClutchKit, a reproductive health kit sparked by a dinner conversation with Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Gloria Steinem. Enjoy the show. Welcome, Lisa. It's so good to have you. We're so grateful for Mimi, our beautiful dear friend Mimi, for introducing us. And Mimi is like the ultimate connector. And the last time I think we saw you, we were in the pouring down rain in a mad dash to eat lunch together before you had to go to a meeting. So this one's going to be maybe slower paced, but still short because it's a podcast. So welcome.
Thank you. I'm really excited about being here. Thank you for having me.
So tell us a little bit about your backstory, because you have such a unique story, but you're involved in a project, which is right in our hearts of what we do at Massive in particular. Tell us how you got here and what the project is, just to give proper context to why you're shaking the system.
Sure. I guess I'll talk a little bit about sort of my background and my passion. Mm-hmm. I've had sort of an interesting background where I've done many different. So I've worked in nonprofit, the government, law firm, business, and now consulting. So I've done a variety of things, but I've always been passionate about gender equality and reproductive justice. So that's been a constant my whole life. I started off at the ACLU working in women's rights and reproductive. It's called Women's Rights and Reproductive Freedom at the time. The names have changed a bit now. And then, I'd written a lot about gender equality and reproductive justice when I was at Stanford Law School, and then clerking with Justice Ginsburg on the Supreme Court, somebody I'd long admired, having worked at the ACLU. I had the good fortune to work on the court's last landmark gender equality decision called United States versus Virginia, which found that an all-male military school called VMI, which did not admit women but did receive state funding, was in violation of the Equal Protection Clause. And the court said they had to open their doors to women who were ready and able to attend. That was a really fascinating, thrilling, and somewhat scary to work on drafting that opinion, but generally speaking, really exciting opportunity. I joined the board of Planned Parenthood a few years later and became very engaged in that work. That's a roll up your sleeves board. And then ultimately, when the Dobbs decision came down, I've done a fair amount of interviews on media around reproductive justice in the Supreme Court. I go to most of those cases at the court. And then when the Dobbs decision came down, I kind of revived this idea around ClutchKit.
And tell us a little bit about that, about ClutchKit. Just like if you're in one of those, like you're in a casual conversation and somebody says, "What's that?"
Right.
That's actually the first question. So we start with that, right?
Yeah, that's a good idea. Let's just frame it that way. Good idea, Virginia. Go ahead.
Yeah. The first question that we ask everybody is, what is a great idea you have that might piss off some powerful people?
Look, I think it's a great idea. I hope it is. When the Dobbs decision came down, the Supreme Court decision that overturned Roe and Casey, I knew that I wanted to do something. And I had this dinner the night of Donald Trump's first inauguration. So the night of his first inauguration down in Washington, D.C., I brought my entire family down to D.C. to march in the Women's Rights March. If you remember, there was really attended Women's Rights March the next day. I brought them all down. I've got 4 kids. And we had a dinner that night with Justice Ginsburg and Gloria Steinem. I had invited the 2 80-year-old matriarchs of the women's rights movement to come to dinner with us. And Gloria brought a number of women who were speaking at the march the next day, one of whom was an actress. And the 2 of us were talking that night, and it was really her idea. She said, what if we just take this whole issue away from the politicians and give women a kit that has all the tools they need in it for sexual and reproductive health? And I thought, that's a brilliant idea. The kit that night, as we were talking about it, had all kinds of tools. It was a big kit. It was like a suitcase. But years later, when the Downs decision came down, I pared it way down, Virginia, so that it's laser focused on the prevention of unintended pregnancies. So it's a kit that has a few tools in it. It's got a tin of condoms in it. It has emergency contraception, morning after pill. It has pregnancy tests, and it also has clear information about the prevention of pregnancy and how to use these tools. And the idea is to get this kit into the hands of every young woman and young man, but especially young women across our country, especially those in red states with limited options and limited means, so that they have the tools to prevent an unwanted pregnancy before it happens. And the way that, a lot of people my age did not grow up with emergency contraception or the morning after pill. And the way that it works is very different than abortion medication. I know both of you know this, but abortion medication terminates an existing pregnancy. Morning after pill or emergency contraception prevents a pregnancy from ever happening by delaying ovulation. And this is, this preventative approach is, in my mind, just a great one, because we have an absurdly high rate of unintended pregnancies in our country. For a country this wealthy and this well educated, it's shameful that we have such a high rate of unintended pregnancies. And for people who don't have choice or the means of choice, that can be a really difficult situation. The nice thing about all these tools in the kit is that they are legal in all 50 states right now. They are legal in all 50 states and over the counter. But in my mind, there's a lot, I see a lot going on in our country, both in the federal government and in state governments, that are seeking to reduce access, to limit access to a lot of these tools, especially emergency contraception. So they've, cut funding to federally funded clinics. There's all kinds of legislation that's been introduced to limit or decrease, make it harder to access emergency contraception. We have some 8,000 zip codes in our country that are considered contraceptive deserts where you can't get these tools. And so, it's a big idea in the sense that, it's really, it's important in my mind to empower women and to empower women with these tools in order for them to live the lives that they want to live, to have kids when they want to have kids, but when they're ready to do so. So that's the idea.
I saw the kit. I mean, I remember last time that we talked and you showed me actually the open box and you showed me what was in the package. Yeah. And it's beautiful. And one thing that I like a lot, and many other countries have done it too, when they talk about or they develop programs for sexual education and sexual and reproductive rights, especially with young women, is to give them not just the information, and also kind of help them with tools on how to reinforce their right to use condoms, for instance, and to negotiate the condom with their partners, and to negotiate how to say no and that kind of things. That's really important. But one thing that we found that was important and very useful is for women to have condoms themselves.
Yes.
Usually we rely on boys or men to buy them and to bring them, and we hope that they're going to do it. But if they don't, then women are put in a position of a lot of pressure in the moment without having their own resource. So having themselves saying like, no problem, I cover myself, I'm protecting myself, here you go. If they come with the excuse that, oh, I didn't bring any, but we should not stop the moment, it's like, no problem, I have my own. So
Right.
that, I think, and it's being proved, at least in Latin America, I work with hundreds of nonprofit organizations and social movement that have promoted that kind of things, even having condoms accessible in public bathrooms, for instance, for women to have access to them. That has proved been very effective, even more effective than targeting boys and men on, use.
Right.
And so that's really amazing. And the other thing is related to the morning after pill. That is true. There are a lot of misunderstandings and misinformation and actually lies about what it does, and that are just moral based and very conservative, value based, but not really science based.
Right.
And is especially in moments where women have a situation, have experienced some kind of unprotected sex, and in many cases not voluntarily, meaning
Right.
that college, for instance, is a very common situation where they might not be able to run to a pharmacy and get that kind of preventive protection themselves the morning after. They
Yes.
either in rural areas, they don't have any place nearby, or the place nearby doesn't bring those kind of products, so they
Exactly.
don't have access, and they have a very short window
Yes.
of for that kind of uh, preventive measure to work. Is really, that's why it's called the morning after pill. You should not take it like a week after,
Right.
when you finally get to a place that actually carry them. So
Exactly.
is the kind of things that you need in the moment, and you need to have with you all the time, because you might need them in the moment. Not sometimes it's impossible for people to plan for this, so just have them
Exactly.
available makes a big difference.
100%. I mean, we heard so many stories from young people about the difficulty accessing these tools, whether it had to do with the price, whether it was trying to get to a pharmacy, the pharmacy didn't have it, lock and key, you had to ask the pharmacist, they were nervous about seeing their parents or their parents' friends. There are a number of, they sort of think they're invincible. There's a number of, these hurdles that meant that people didn't have it when they needed it, as you said. So the idea is to, have this in your dorm room, have this in your sock drawer, have this with you when you're traveling. It's discreet and it's nice looking, but that you're protected, that you've got the tools that you might need in whatever situation you're in.
Yeah, when you think about
Yeah.
it, they're human rights, they're women's rights. I mean, they should be, like in some countries, they should be in public bathrooms
Right.
available, all of them, just
Yes.
because is their right. And here you have to create a whole project, and then do it with the struggles of just get them to access them, to
Yes.
access
Right.
the kid.
Yeah. So I'm going to be delicate with this kind of setup, Lisa, because um, I'll put it this way: you circulate in powerful circles. Lots of powerful people. So when we think about the second question of what kind of obstacles are you seeing, a resistance to the idea, we would sit here and go, well, this is a brilliant idea. Why would you be against that? And me coming from as a former right-wing Christian conservative from rural America, I understand. I do not obviously agree with it. I understand the grassroots sort of, small town church going person that's just anti this. I don't want to analyze them at this point. What I'm curious about, though, is what kind of resistance are you seeing to this idea within power circles that you're circulating in? What is their excuse for being against this?
I mean, it's an interesting question, and I appreciate the framework. When I talk to people, I have actually not seen a whole lot of pushback to this idea.
Hmm.
One of the things that's unusual about this is that, and look, as you can tell from my background, I'm on the left side of this issue, in the sense I really believe in reproductive justice for
Hmm.
all people. But we are really trying to focus on the middle ground here and say, and that's not a particularly comfortable place for me, but we're trying
Hmm.
to say, look, anti-choice or pro-life people and pro-choice people should both agree that the prevention of unintended or unwanted pregnancies is a good thing and something that we can come together on and agree on. The place that we're having more pushback in a way, Justin, is in the fact that we're like redefining this category in a strange way. And what I mean by
Hmm.
that is a lot of the political discourse out there is around abortion. And so the prevention
Hmm.
is not one that's as talked about, the prevention of pregnancy. We've seen a lot of talk recently around like encouraging women to have more babies, uh, and encouraging abstinence only and the rhythm method, going back to that as opposed to just basic sex education. Um, so I would say that middle ground is one where people are they're inching forward. And when
Hmm.
I sat next to somebody who was pro-life, quite pro-life, last week, and I explained to her this ClutchKit idea, and I could tell she was slow to embrace it, but once she understood it and she understood what's in the kit, she did embrace it and said that she would get one for all three of her kids. But in addition to that, it's a strange one because it's a new category in the sense of like we want this to be giftable, and people
Hmm.
are not used to gifting reproductive tools. So
Hmm.
it's very unusual for people to think about gifting this. But when we talk
Hmm.
to moms and dads about gifting it, they love the idea of having a prop that they can use to then have a cool conversation with their almost adult kids about, you
Hmm.
know, about their values and stuff. Another challenge that we have is the stigma around this. We talked a little bit about that, but there is stigma around the morning after pill. Even when I went into a pharmacy to build a prototype kit that I was going to use in a focus group, I was putting all these products into my cart at CVS, and I ran into a friend's husband who looked at my cart with the morning after pill and condom and all kinds of things in it. He said, "Whoa, you having a big weekend, Lisa?" Making a joke. But still, I felt embarrassed at my advanced age. And I just thought, wow, imagine what a
Hmm.
20-year-old feels, or an 18-year-old, or
Hmm.
a 16-year-old. So there's a lot of stigma that we're up against, that we're fighting. And then I would say recently we were actually in Texas trying to get into campus bookstores. And this is an example of it being sort of people can't quite understand what this is. We said this is a great toolkit to have in campus bookstores so that when kids go to college, they can get their books and they can get their ClutchKit,
Hmm.
help them make it through college. And they're like, well, we've never had these kinds of products in our campus bookstore. So, schools are very hesitant. Like, I don't know if we want to be in the business of handing
Hmm.
it out. So we're coming up against that, people just not being used to having this as Virginia said, like an
Yeah.
everyday tool that people need.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
the, the other thing I would just quickly note is that the political environment today, is so divisive. People don't know how to come together. It's so fear-based. There's a lot of things going on right now. There's so much distraction. I'm finding it hard to get people to focus on this and talk.
Yeah.
Yet it affects a
Yeah.
huge number of people. I mean, we have something like close to 3 million unintended pregnancies in this.
Right. Yeah. It's from what I do in branding, and especially in category development. I think you nailed even if it wasn't politically charged, which it shouldn't be politically charged, but it is. So, it's like Rob Bell says, everything is political. Is when you have to go out and the mind of the buyer has to create. It's not even positioning. It's a new thing that didn't exist.
Right.
It is a challenge for everyone that has to do that. If I looked at over the last 10 years, the main reasons people hired me to help with them with branding was I don't know how to talk about it, and I don't know how to develop the category for it. Or they don't use that word because most people don't know it's a category, but that's what the problem is.
Right.
And it also shows how more information does not increase velocity.
Right.
It's not information, it's the emotional hook. And I think one of the most successful campaigns, ironically, for this was Viagra, where they ran. Obviously, they put a shit ton of money they put a lot of money into advertising, but it wasn't that's because it wasn't a word of mouth thing. It's not like dudes don't talk about that stuff with each other most of the time. But in this case, there's a natural kind of communal aspect to it that it's got built-in word of mouth, but they still need to be able to find it, from a distribution standpoint. So, yeah, I mean, I could nerd out with you all day on that challenge alone, let alone the political challenge of it.
Well, we're definitely going to need to talk more, and I want some of your branding insights here because it is really challenging when I think it should be so simple. So
yeah.
I gotta figure out how to get there.
And I think that another thing that happens with this kind of ideas is that the whole strategy that you're managing, and I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that, because I understand that the ClutchKit is a product that belongs to a for-profit company. And so the idea was to sell them at, I guess, an affordable price for parents and teachers and schools and students or young people to buy it and to give it as gift as well.
Right.
And that's a marketing strategy. I mean, that's a business model. But for this kind of product that are so really is like essential in many ways.
Yes.
There are many different approaches that will help the product to the ClutchKit to not be seen as a product, but be seen as a tool for a cause.
Yes.
And
a movement, right.
Change the model, the business model into a movement, a social movement where the kids, actually the young people, feel that sense of belonging and own the concept and the kid as something that they want to promote. So that implies to change your business model to make it a tool for a cause and not just a product that has a social intention. So it's many things that you can consider there.
Virginia, that's a great point. I'm so glad that you brought it up because we did start as a for-profit company. I mean, we tried to keep our prices down to below the dominant brand's cost of the morning after pill. And we baked into the margin the ability to give kits away. And then we decided we also wanted to have a nonprofit that could take distributions and get those kits into schools, into communities that really need them. And so we set up a nonprofit just for that reason. And that's been really fun to see. It sounds to me like there's a bit of an echo. Is it okay on your end?
It's okay. It's
Okay.
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 Riverside will take care of that.
And that's been really fun to see. We've had some people make significant donations, and we put 500 kids into public schools in California or into colleges in different places, and that's something we're really excited about. We're leaning into more and more.
I mean, and this is the kind of things that we love to help organizations with, because there are many examples. Just in Nicaragua, for instance, there was the organization I worked for a long time ago. We published a magazine that was a feminist magazine for the women's movement in a country that has no roads to many places and not big distribution. The biggest distribution system that there was in Nicaragua at that time was Coca-Cola, and Coca-Cola was not really excited about supporting women's movement.
Right.
So the La Boletina, which is the magazine, has to develop their own distribution network, and it became the number one mass media, including the national newspapers, including the national television news, was the number one mass media in terms of distribution and reach. And it all happened with a network of volunteers distributing, taking from the capital, taking, I don't know, 1,000 of the magazines back to the region, and then distributed to other people that took 100 each to the region, and then another 50, whatever. But it became a really spread out network of volunteers that were taking the research that was for free for them, for the benefits, to the farthest places. So this is just an example of when you give access to something that is perceived as valuable by the people that want to receive it. You can also organize a whole distribution network that doesn't rely on institution and their approvals, because institutional power is becoming a bottleneck for a lot of things in terms of social organizing. But you can bypass that if you have the right strategy to make it a movement in that way.
Yes, I would like to do just that.
So as people can donate in money, for producing more kits, or people can donate in time and energy to hosting and being a network hub, for instance. I mean, there are many ways that you can think, and I'm talking to you, Lisa, about the ClutchKit, because I really think it's a great idea and I really think it's necessary, but I'm also talking to our audience that have similar ideas and want to get some services or products accessible to as many people as possible, and they are constrained by the limiting belief we have about institutionalized networks or distribution or funding, or there are many other ways if you use creativity and you understand a little bit about system thinking.
Yes, I like that. I want to show you what I have right here too. Oh no, I think this is, but I just got this in the mail. An old Newsweek with Glory on the cover.
Oh, her famous glasses.
Exactly.
Nice.
Do you want to ask the last one, Virginia?
So the last one will be, what is the impact that you envision for the ClutchKit? I mean, what will be ideal?
I mean, honestly, I'm after reducing the number of unintended pregnancies or unwanted pregnancies and empowering those young women to live the lives that they want to, live out their dreams. There's some other statistics that I would like to address too. For example, the year after the Dobbs decision, there were some 65,000 pregnancies brought to term due to rape and incest. 26,000 of those were in Texas alone.
Wow.
And I would, if those women had had a ClutchKit near them, they would have been able to prevent those pregnancies that had been the result of violence that's a statistic I'd like. So I'd like to decrease the number of unintended, unwanted pregnancies in this country. I'd like to decrease those pregnancies that were brought to term due to rape and incest. I'd like to change that statistic. I'm sort of giving you very statistic oriented.
No, that's what we want. Yeah, it's good.
I'd like to
That's
change
impact.
that statistic that I talked about, 8,000 zip codes that are considered contraceptive deserts. I don't want there to be any more contraceptive deserts in our country. We are too well, endowed to have that. I'd like to increase the number of podcasts and articles and media attention on things like emergency contraception and the morning pill. Virginia, as you mentioned, there's so much purposeful confusion around this. And I know that it's purposeful because I see what's being introduced in state legislatures. I don't know that emergency contraception will always be legal in our country at the rate that we are going.
Right.
So I would like to make sure that these tools, people really understand these tools. And the number of articles out there and and information out there. There was a real, when this current administration came in, there was kind of an erasing of information that had to do with women and reproductive health and other subjects that are so important. So I'd like the information to get out there. And, as I mentioned in the very beginning, I'd like every young woman and every young man to have this toolkit in their bedroom.
Yeah. Well, that's big and bold, and it's interesting how callings work. These things arrive in the most strange and timely ways. To a dinner, it sounds like almost like a movie, a dinner with Gloria Steinem and Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and somebody said, and here we are. That's what we call a spiritual enterprise, and it's not really a religious term. It's like sometimes your calling finds you based off of your skills, and you're using your scalable genius here to put some muscle and passion behind this. So kudos to you for that. If someone wants to learn more, I assume they can go to the website. Can they purchase direct? Can they go as direct to consumer option?
They can. They can purchase ClutchKits and send them to, their kids. They can send them to cousins and friends, or buy them for themselves. They can also make a donation. And we will get those kits into the hands of women who most need them. It's a little bit tricky finding our website. It's the ClutchKit, because it turns out that there's a lot of car clutch kits.
Yes.
Standard, which I didn't think of when I named it ClutchKit. I named it ClutchKit because of the fact that it's like a clutch, and also because of the fact that in a clutch moment.
In a clutch, right, yeah.
Need, but I forgot about the car. So eclutchkit.com, the name of our website, and then we've got, social and.
Okay, I'll link to all that. We'll link to all that in the show notes. So, well, thank you so much. We're going to say goodbye to you and go to the second show and talk about what we heard. So thank you so much, Lisa. We'll talk again soon.
Thank you so much for having me on.
All right, take care.
Bye.
Man, I love this idea. I think is a real system shaker idea, because it's bypassing institutions. I mean, when governors and legislators and some judges and, like the people in power are trying to limit and actually violate and ban those rights that are human rights, having civilians, having the people getting organized and say, like, we're going to provide it ourselves. We're going to get our power back, and we're going to organize other people, and we're going to make this accessible ourselves. That is really good.
Yeah. I admire in in some, she has a strength that I don't think I'll ever have, which is the ability to kind of stay neutral in the sense of like she mentioned, like in the meeting people in the middle, because the whole time she was talking, or you were sharing, or she was sharing, I literally, it might even be on video, I'm chewing on the inside of my mouth because as a man, this is so unnecessary that this even is a thing. Like it's even a thing, and it makes me angry. And I've been trying to manage my anger about these issues, harness it, that it's even a thing. And what makes me also like a little bit like I don't know what the emotion is, but I can feel it in my body of like, you go down to a state legislator in a red state, they do not want this because it's not about pregnancy. It's not even really about sex because they're doing all kinds of stuff behind closed doors. And we know this, within that particular sector is a lot of abuse in that sector, sexual abuse in that sector. It's more of this ancient or multi 1500 year in particular desire to control other people, but especially women. And the level, like the white hot heat that brings up in me, that's a thing, is I admire her restraint in that, because I don't know that if I was, I hope we get a chance to help her with her brand and her structure and everything. But even if I'm going to have to be restrained in that, because I know what I would want to say, but she is navigating within these different power dynamics as you talk about. So one of the questions I had for you, when you were dealing with power dynamics, not that you're not now, but especially when you were like boots on the ground in Nicaragua with like Sexto, your show, the show, the stuff you were doing with Puntos, all that. How did you stay sane dealing with institutional misogyny that was saying it was about being pro-life, but it wasn't really about pro-life? They're saying it was about pregnancy, but it wasn't really about pregnancy. How did you handle that?
Well, that was not our audience, starting with that, and we were very very clear. They were detractors. They were trying to sabotage it. They will fight us. I was me and the team. We were let's say the front line, the containers of those attacks, because behind us there were thousands and thousands and dozens of thousands of young people owning the strategy, owning the media, owning
I see.
the series, reproducing it, making that was a whole movement. So we were the container wall, let's say, against those attacks, because they couldn't attack a whole social movement. And those results, seeing the results, seeing the young people having access to that information, generating dialogues and debates, creating fans club, doing the tours, doing all the things, participating, getting organized themselves. Seeing all that impact of our, let's say, our product or our project, that helped me to know where to invest my energy. It's really about energy investment. We were focusing more on investing energy where it matters, where the impact was making, instead of trying to overcome a resistance that we knew was there, because it's a system. It's part of a complex system. You're always going to have resistance. So you can go like Mother Teresa said, I'm going to fight for peace, not necessarily against war. It seems the similar thing seems the same, but it's not the same. So we were fighting for the kids and the impact that we were making, not against the people that were trying to, get those rights. So focus.
Yeah, I've never thought about that. That's interesting. I also think that this is just my opinion from like almost like a dialogue, a social dialogue thing, that those of us that are pro human rights, pro human rights, that we elevate it above the left or right binary, because it's not, that's a made up thing anyway, that binary. But human rights is not made up. Natural law is a thing. Dignity is a thing. And we commonly hear, we'll say, well, I'm on the left when it comes to, reproductive rights. Well, you're either, but that's right. If we elevate that to say, I am for human rights, that therefore it's not a left or right thing anymore.
Shouldn't be.
And I think,
It shouldn't
no,
be.
I know, I'm not talking about her. I'm just saying it's a common thing when we talk about political discourse. It's kind of a continuation, not of what Lisa said, but a continuation of how it's become a two sides issue. And it's one of those things that I don't understand. We'll just take a different thing, like a trans person and the goal and the desire to erase trans people. How does a person being trans have anything to do with how you're living your life? It doesn't. And that's why I'm talking about elevating the conversation. It's above the binary of left or right. Some people honestly are just wrong. It's not like, well, there's two sides to this. It's not really. If it's human rights, there's not two sides to it. Either you do it or you don't, or you believe it or you don't.
Yeah, but that's not what Lisa was talking. I mean,
I
yes,
know. I'm saying as the overall dialogue about the general thing related to reproductive rights.
yeah, human rights are not something you agree or you disagree with. They're
Right, but it happens all the
rights.
time. They'll say that though. Well, we'll agree to disagree, or why can't we just get along, or let's meet in the middle. It's like, well, no. If you want to erase people's personhood because of who they are, there's no middle there. That doesn't exist.
Yeah, the thing is that there is I think that even more and more these days, the spectrum of what is included in human rights is getting really, there are fewer and fewer rights considered human rights now, and sexual and reproductive rights are not considered human rights. And
That
when
just blows my mind.
women,
Yeah.
it's really, really ridiculous. But when we talk about women's right, the fact that we have to call women's right when women
Yeah.
are human, those are
Yes.
human
Right.
rights as
Yes.
well. But
Yes.
the conservative group call it women's right to make a distinction from human's right, because any group's right are negotiable. They're not
Right.
human's right.
If it's so true, especially when you're in power,
Yeah.
and you could see the foolishness of this with, like, if you try to pass a law, and I actually think this might even be a good idea, that every not really a good idea, but just as a point of reference here, every teenage boy has to get a vasectomy until he proves that he's ready to be a father. Well, the same people would be like, oh, you can't do that.
Yeah.
That's his body. Or the same thing with the mask during COVID. I don't want to wear a mask. It's my choice.
Yeah.
It's the dissonance and the insanity of that it baffles me. Because I can remember, even as a right-wing Christian conservative, listened to Rush Limbaugh, had liked all that, was considered myself. I was pro-life in the sense of it from a standpoint of not as a movement, but as an opinion. But I knew, even when I was a young hothead conservative, I'm a dude. I don't have any say in this. It's the arrogance to think that these men in suits or in pulpits are deciding for other people something they cannot experience is, to me, as a Christian, the exact opposite of what Jesus taught. The arrogance of that just makes my teeth hurt.
Yeah, but that's the whole point. And what Lisa was mentioning, the left and right, is the problem is that human rights the concept of human rights is more and more limited now than ever.
Yes.
And there is on one side that the position that humans' rights are every human's right. Like it
Yes.
doesn't matter if you have the opportunity to exercise that right or not. That doesn't
Right.
make it less human and less right. But
Yes.
the other side, the conservative side said, no, they're basic human rights that also, first, they're not universal. I mean, those human rights might be universal, but groups' rights are not universal, are not humans' right. They're a specific group's right and therefore negotiable. And even the so-called human rights, like the right to life, is interpretable. Like, what do we mean?
Right.
What we call life really, and who is a
Right.
human and who's not?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so all that negotiation of humans' right come from the right side, from the extreme conservative side.
Right.
There
Yes.
is two sides. It's like the one side
Right.
is the one that says, if you're human, you have rights. It applies to everybody. Period.
Right.
And nobody
Right.
has the right to determine who has more rights than others.
I understand that. What I'm saying is how did it become where did someone that identifies as a conservative that for, when you think about the Republican Party was born out of opposition to slavery, as an example, and some of the first more of the liberation movement, they were more on the Republican side. They weren't on the Democrat side early on in a lot of these movements. It's like something, and I could get into the history, I know why, but it happened along the way that suddenly conservatism became about restricting other people's right to exist, which is the antithesis of what conservatism actually is when you look at it from a academic, I guess you could say, historical perspective. It doesn't make any sense to me. It never has. It made sense to me how someone has decided, well, I'm a conservative, therefore I'm going to restrict a woman's access to reproductive health care. Like that doesn't compute to me as it relates to being a conservative. It's like an add-on belief that doesn't make any sense. That's all I'm saying.
I mean, you know the answer to this, but I'm gonna give mine anyway. I mean, it happens everywhere. In Latin America is the same. In Europe is the same. What it was decades ago, the difference in parties, conservative and liberal, was mostly about economic views. Was
Yes.
about property and the scale of the government. Was more economics and politics. With time, in the past few decades, there has been a huge fundamentalist wave that have to take over powerful groups and have turned politics into moral and religious statements. So now it's not really, the right and left is not really about economics.
That's what I mean. Right. That's what I mean. Yeah.
Supposedly left governments in Latin America are extremely right, right in terms of conservative when it comes to human rights, for instance, and women's rights and queer rights. And so it's not about economics anymore. It's about morality, it's about religious beliefs, it's about patriarchy, and it's about having the moral power of a certain group over everybody else. That's what it is now. So
yes. And my point to my point to that, just to wrap that part of me trying to explain it, is for myself is that being a conservative meant less government and leave me alone. Now it means more government unless I'm in charge, and I get to do whatever I want. If my party's in charge, I can accept the president I voted for, not me, but somebody voted for, can accept a $400 million jet or whatever it is from Qatar, because now the people that I agree with are in charge. The government can kind of do whatever they want as long as it's not to people like me. again, the dissonance, the lack of honest intellectual honesty, to me is, it's like a deal killer with having any sort of conversation, because it doesn't make any sense. How can you say the government should be small and leave us alone, and then you're like, yeah, we're going to ban the morning after pill for junk science propaganda reasons? It's stupid. That's all I'm saying. There's the summary of it all. It is optional stupidity, and you know how I feel about optional stupidity. So anyway, I appreciate you helping me kind of talk through that feeling, because it just, I don't know, it's stupid. It's stupid. That's all I have to say about it. So, any final thoughts?
So let's close by saying all the links to Lisa's project are on the show notes. And if you want to help, reach out to her. There are many ways, as I say, many ways you can help. You can volunteer. You can offer a space. If you have a space where young people attend, or you have access to them and you want to make this accessible to them, if you want to buy some of the ClutchKits to distribute with your community, I mean, there are many, many ways you can be part of this, in spite of your current government not helping. So
that's right.
Do that.
Exactly. And as always, please share this episode, obviously to help Lisa and her team at ClutchKit spread the word, but also so more people know what we do. And if you know of a social entrepreneur or a nonprofit leader that wants to bring more of a systems thinking approach to their leadership and to the way that they brand themselves, please introduce us, and stay tuned for the next episode.